Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Again, today's topic, building a smarter marketing process, proactive strategies for business growth. Looking for working smarter, not harder there. So, Carrie, we brought in our smart expert for today, our returning guest, Carrie Chadoff. Probably needs no introduction, but I will introduce you again anyway, Carrie. Our Vice President of Marketing here at C2P and head of our marketing agency. Carrie brings over 25 years of experience leading high-performing teams and delivering integrated programs that fuel sales growth, expand market reach, and strengthen customer loyalty. Carrie, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Matt. And just for everyone listening, I've actually been in the industry for 35 years, but apparently I've only led high-performing teams for 25 of those. So hopefully the last 2 years at C2P are part of that 25 general number.
We're letting our audience determine, which of those 25 of the 35 years have been hardworking.
For those, feel free to comment in the chat.
No, but and before we jump in, as usual in the coffee breaks, please, if you have any questions along the way, for myself or Carrie, or for the group participation there, please drop those in the chat, and we'll address as many as we can today. Especially as it relates to marketing plans, marketing process, what you're doing, or have questions for us, and we are happy to address those. But Carrie, we will jump into this first one. I know it's one that we get this question a lot, especially on the mentor calls coming in. But on the importance of working all the leads coming in, I know there's a tendency to, hey, we run lead generation programs either on our own or through partners, third parties that we work with. And then you get the leads that book on your calendar through Calendly or whatever service you have, or, hey, I got these attendees that are coming in. I want to make sure I follow up with each one. But it's so critical, and we talk about this all the time, to be following up with every lead, not just the ones that are saying, hey, I want to sign up right now, because they've all expressed some level of interest. Can you address that, why it's so critical to be following up with each of those leads, each of those registrants in a webinar's case?
Yeah, Matt, it is something that I talk to advisors about all the time. Sometimes we'll run a webinar, and the main discussion is about show rates. And to clarify what a show rate is, it's the percentage of individuals that registered versus the percent that actually attend. So if you have 50 people register, 10 people attend, that's a 20% show rate. Even people in marketing can figure out that math. Normally we'll say, well, out of those 10, maybe we got 2 right fit calls, and I didn't get any clients, and this webinar wasn't successful. And I want to challenge that thinking. Is it so much more than just the show rate? So what are you doing about the 40 out of the 50 that registered but didn't attend? They gave you an intent that they were interested in something that was in your ad, your communication, your email, your one-on-one communication. So to ignore those 40 is a great mistake. I'd also suggest that out of those 40 that did not attend, those people are perfect to invite them to future campaigns, to invite them to future webinars, live events. In fact, many advisors will say, Carrie, my email actually generated just as many respondents, registrants as my meta campaign. So why did we run the meta? Well, I want to tie both things back to each other. You only really got those leads because you ran a webinar or a book guide earlier. So you kind of have to think about these campaigns building on each other. The other aspect that I want to talk about is many advisors will only talk to the 10 that actually showed or attended. Many leads failed to convert because there's no structured follow-up. And you're going to hear Matt and I talk about today that you have to have a structured follow-up. You have to have it assigned. You have to track. Tracking is very important. So that's why I don't look at just those that do show or attend or raise their hand, Matt, as leads that need to be followed up by advisors.
Right. And, I want to reinforce too, because it's probably been a while since we've hit on this, but we've actually gone through spurts and things go through waves. I'm sure all of you, if you've done respective lead gen over the years. But we've had several different times kind of in our lead life cycle over at JL Smith where we will end up getting more right fit calls from those that sign up for a webinar and don't attend. And because we're following up with those after the fact, a lot of times they have questions. Those are the people that didn't get their question answered because they weren't able to attend that webinar. And so having that email or phone call follow up to say, hey, we're sorry you weren't able to make it. We still want to make sure you get your question answered. Could we set up a time to connect? And so a lot of times we end up with more right fit calls that way than those that are actually signing up on the webinar. And to Carrie's point, that the type of follow up matters too. Just relying on email certainly should always have that email nurture campaign. I think Carrie's going to do that later. But having someone that can pick up the phone, and it's going to get into something I'm going to ask you in a second here, Carrie. But I think a real life example story of something we had somewhat recently at JL Smith too, an event that we had in our Minneapolis office, and we had a small group event there. Sent the email out the next morning, and we got one right fit call that booked from I think we had 9 or 10 attendees there, and talked to our business development gentleman and was like, hey, we got to get on the phone the next day. Don't just rely on this email. We all know, as much as we'd love to believe that 100% of our emails are opened by our clients and prospects, that's not the reality. And that's also why we're going to get into the tracking later. But those guys pounded the phones the next day. By the end of that day, so just in one day, 7 more right fit calls versus the one that we got from an email. So 7 of the 9 they talked to that day booked right fit calls. So
well, Matt, I want to kind of parlay off this as we'll do. Who knows when we get to our second question, but I hear often that advisors say, well, I called the 40 and I got in touch with 2. There's a stat by a company called Martel, which is an AI company. They said 44% of salespeople stop after one follow-up call. And we know, especially in this industry, you're going after busy, either professionals, business owners, people that are pressed for time. That they generally, if you're targeting someone with $1 million or more, they're probably not sticking around just to answer your call on the first call. So make sure you're making more than one call. Again, track it, have a system in place. But really, it's not, to me, a well follow-up process. If you call once, you don't get in touch with someone and say, yeah, out of the 40, I left messages for 32. That is going to happen. I want to set proper expectations, but keep calling.
No, thanks. And actually, you just spurred another idea for me before we move on to the next one. When you're call, because these are all like great points and tips and things we've learned ourselves, and honestly from a lot of you over the years doing this. But as much as possible, when you are following up or you have someone from your team following up, take a few minutes to craft that voicemail script ahead of time. As much as you can, do not call and say, hey, I'm just calling to follow up. Have a purpose to the call. Try and tie in something from the webinar. If you're running the new OBBB webinar, the Big Beautiful Bill webinar that we have available, pick a provision out of there. Hey, I want to call and make sure you're not missing out on XYZ. Give them a reason to call back versus just you're one of another voicemail following up on something. So take a few minutes to craft that. Can always lean on our team over here to help you craft that. ChatGPT or any AI service you're using to help with that. But use that to help elicit that call back from them on that side.
I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially around sales. And one interesting follow-up when someone says, I'm not interested, ask them in a polite way, well, what initially were you interested about legacy planning when you downloaded that guide that's no longer a concern, right? Kind of bring it back, opposed to just someone saying, yeah, thanks, I'm not concerned. You're like, okay, let me know if you do, is try to get into it and say, well, what about, the OB bill that you were interested in when you downloaded, that is no longer of interest. So obviously practice the how you're going to present that so it's not combative, but try to peel back the onion because, if they're saying I'm not interested anymore, they're treating you as a salesperson and you're so much more.
Yep. Thank you. And so we've kind of already hit on this, Carrie, indirectly to the next one. We've all heard that phrase, speed to lead. Get there faster, be the first one to follow up. But we also recognize sometimes it's not always easy to put into practice with everything going on in daily lives. Can you share how does that timely follow up impact an advisor's ability to get in touch with someone and keep them moving throughout the process?
Well, let me just go back to the example I just used. If I downloaded something on estate planning, let's just say it's a guide, um, and I get a call later that day, it's still fresh in my mind. It's still, I haven't had a chance to read it. Great, can I call you back in 2 days? But if you call me a week later or call me a month later, I'm pretty much thinking, I don't know if I read it. I don't remember. Thanks. I'm no longer interested. But clearly there was an interest. Um, think about any other industry you may work with. If you put in an email, perhaps to, a painter, a plumber, construction, and they call you right back, from their website. I know I've done that with like lawn care. Somebody calls and say, I saw you wanted an estimate. How can we help you? I'm like, wow, I didn't even hit enter yet. I didn't think. So, urgency is really, really important. Think about it as yourself as a consumer. Fast follow up within 24 to 48 hours, especially after a resource request or a webinar is watched. I'm going to be honest with you, folks. We generate a lot of leads for advisors that we work with. If you don't intend to follow up with each and every one, I would honestly tell you to save your money from running meta campaigns. The phone is not going to ring. And I have this discussion. I want to be realistic. When you run a meta campaign, I mean, we all hope our fingers are crossed that someone's going to download a guide. It's going to be so compelling. We're going to send them an email and they can't wait to call and set an appointment with you. Now, I don't know how often that happens to you. If it happens more than 1 out of 100, awesome. Now, we've got great content writers at C2P. I still want to challenge the thought of I need my phone to ring. I want to change that perspective and want to say you need to make the phone ring on the other end. So you need to be proactive. No millionaire is so excited about a guide or a 40-minute presentation. They say, I'm dropping everything right now and I'm going to contact the agent. So follow up means within 24 to 48 hours on everybody. In fact, there's another stat, and I'm going to throw out stats. For those that went to Minneapolis, I like stats. Marketing Sherpa, advisors that contact leads within 1 to 2 days of initial engagement see conversion rates up to 60% higher than those who wait a week or more. Is anybody potentially surprised by that? Again, think about your own experience. You download something, a day or two, business days. That means someone's interest. That means there's a relationship. If it takes you a week or 2 or 3 to follow up, is that really representative of how you're going to interact when potentially I'm a client? Oh, no, I treat my clients much different. This is a trial run. This is how do you deliver experience. There isn't an advisor out there that I've ever met that says, yeah, I don't deliver great experience. My difference is the experience. Once they talk with me, so talk with them. So 24, 48 hours, no exceptions.
And Carrie, I think one thing to make that easier, and I know we'll touch on this later if there's time too, is the multi-channel responses to that. The follow-up can mean different things, and it should be layered on. Of certainly, you should be sending the emails, and depending on what type of marketing strategy, a text message response, especially if you're doing webinars, those are fantastic. And then obviously the phone calls. One thing that we do at Jail Smith that's worked well is if you have an event coming up, and you might not be able to do this every time if you're doing a ton, but block out time on your calendar in advance of that event. If you're doing a golf event, block out time those next 2-3 days after to make those calls, because your calendars will fill up. You'll get to that day, you'll say, this was a great event, I'm going to start making calls the next day. Then you look at your calendar and you're like, I have 6 hours of meetings, I don't know when I'm going to get this in. So block that time in advance, and or assign an accountability person. Is there someone else in the office that can be making that follow-up? Doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a business development person like we have at Joe Smith, but do you have someone calling to follow up, and maybe you can provide them a script to help them along? Or obviously a third party. Some of you on here I know have used the Pellegrini team or are using the Pellegrini team, but having anyone that can help add that other touch point of the phone call to be a little more proactive with it.
Now, if you are in a scenario, because we see this on occasion, where you're getting a lot of leads from something that you're doing, and you say, who do I follow up with first? If you've got an intern or somebody in the office that honestly you could Facebook and you can link up each individual, right? And there are going to be some that jump out and say, well, owner of this business or senior executive. I would tell you, again, I'm not dismissing not to call everybody, but if you can only call 5 that day, call the ones that you say, these are the folks that if they came to a presentation, I want them sitting in the front row. So it is a simple trick. You're not going to find everybody. And there are outlets out there that will append information. Matt and I are exploring one as kind of a pilot right now that seems very promising. It talks about assets and interest and other items that might be a good introduction to help you identify. It even has I won't say a propensity score, but a model score. So there are things out there, and we're certainly looking at that for the agency.
And Carrie, some other lead gen outlets you're using might provide some of this, because even if you don't have the time to go through that, there might be some, like Acquire Up or some of these others that at least give you some data. Or if you're running the lead gen on your own, you could start asking some of these questions on your forms. When someone goes to download an ebook or sign up for a webinar, asking like their investable asset level. Little tricky if you want to ask for exact investable assets. I recommend going kind of levels there, give them bands to choose from. But to Carrie's point, asking for title can sometimes give you an indication of that. So any little bit of data that can help you kind of prioritize the follow-up can always help with that as well.
And again, in theory, if you're running an effective Meta or LinkedIn campaign, you already have the parameters. You already say, I want to reach top 5 or 10% household incomes. These are the geographies. These are the interests. So, to a certain extent, you can trust the metadata. But there's also, so if you're like, I don't have time to do that, then make the assumption that all the leads that came through met the criteria that you established up front. So really important, whether you're using C2P agency with Owen and myself and others, that you make sure that you understand who do I want to reach, from occupation to interest to age to household income to whatever else that you may want to consider. So in theory, all of your leads should be qualified.
Yeah. So now kind of moving on to the next section, we know this is why we're doing a lot of this lead gen, want to get into the right fit calls. How do we get more people booked? So when we look at that issue that gets brought up a lot is, my right fit call rates are low, whether that's from a webinar, an ebook, or whatever campaign you're running. How should I improve this? Where should advisors or marketers that are on the call, where should we look first to address those potential gaps of getting more right fit calls?
Well, you can't report on what you don't track, I guess you can say, right? So if you want to report, you've got to track it. So my question is, where is the leak out of the funnel? So if you're getting the 50 leads that I used as initial, and out of the 10 that communicated with you, how many of those 10 set a appointment? How many of those right fit call? And how many of those converted? And so what are your numbers? Because it may not be a lead quality issue. Sometimes I hear, well, out of the 40, no one was interested, and so they weren't good leads. Again, I want to kind of combat that by saying you targeted these individuals. In theory, they should meet all of the criteria. So where is the dropout? If you are calling 40 and you're getting zero interest in another guide or another webinar or having a conversation, could the actual problem be perhaps your follow-up? We kind of talked about the scripting. So possibly it's your follow-up. If you're doing a presentation and you have, again, I'm using simple numbers, 10, and nobody did a right fit call, sometimes they answer like that they weren't good people that came. Or could it have been your presentation? could have been how you presented, could have been how you followed up before they left the room. So the right fit calls are low, but I want to challenge you to find the root cause. Was it the leads? Because that's an easy one to blame, right? I didn't get anything, so the leads were bad. Or was it the presentation? Was it the phone call? Was it the follow-up? So I encourage you to kind of track. Remember, 2% of all sales happen on the first contact across all industries, which means it's got to be multiple touches.
No, thanks, Terry. And I know I've said this before, we've used the quote, what gets measured gets managed. And that's why it's so important with starting somewhere to track what you're doing from a marketing lead gen perspective. But honestly, beyond that, that's why we talk even at the collegiums, the team retreats, like figuring out your scorecard numbers from a business level of where we need to be. That should determine what you're tracking and driving from a marketing and sales perspective of how do you get there as a business. So work backwards with your scorecard, starting with the business ones. And then as Carrie said, once you start to have these numbers, now we can figure out what to address. And there's a lot of things and best practices that we've shared over time. And we can't address them all in a 30-minute coffee break, but that's what we're here to work towards is, Carrie mentioned during the presentation, things that we've learned along the way of those tips and tricks in terms of your call to action within the presentation. A lot of times traditionally it's you do your presentation, you have your call to action at the end. We very much recommend 3 calls to action in there. Put that right in at the beginning, and we have scripting we can share and help you with how to do that. Right in the middle to catch them, and at the end, because if you get someone that's joining and they have something pop up, they have to take a call, they don't make it to the end of that 30 or even 60 if some are still doing 60 minutes. If they never get to that call to action, of course they're not booking a right fit call. So try to find ways to work those in to have 3 throughout, and that's just one tip that I think is gonna could drastically make a difference in your numbers if you start to work those in, and now you see those right fit calls start to compile along with the tips we shared earlier. And all of that comes down to tracking. That's how we can address it before. Now, if you're not getting enough people to the webinar or to download an ebook, that's when you go back to what Carrie was saying is your ad copy and how to get people to actually take action. But once you have them there, now we can start to diagnose what goes into actually getting them to book that right fit call.
And I saw a question from Kirsten as I'm trying to monitor the chat also, and please send in questions. The question was, what is there an industry average on how many touches does it take to convert a lead to a client? I can't state the stat off the top of my head, but I think it's somewhere between 7 and 9. But I also want to clarify that's from a lead to kind of in an appointment to a right fit call. So once you get to a right fit call, obviously we all know that there's many calls. You're confirming, appointments. You're confirming, here's the intake form. Here's the review. Here's a meeting to sign paperwork and all of that. But I think the really question is the leads to a right fit call. And Matt, I think you may have mentioned it in previous, but I think
it was actually at the Collegium in Minneapolis, because I had just come out of I went to a CMO forum at RA Edge. Some of you might have either been at or heard some of the comings out of that. And that statistic came up of how many touch points it takes. And Carrie, you're right. I think it was 7 to 9 was the average touch points for a lead to sign up to go through your sales process. So not necessarily a client, but to go through the process. But we kind of went around that room and shared, and it sounded like the average maybe really should have been in the 10 to 13 range.
Yeah.
But either way, both of those make the point of we have to manage our own expectations in terms of, well, I did a webinar. Why am I not getting 80% of the people to sign up? That a lot of these different marketing strategies, that's why the multi-channel strategies are the best, because you're able to build in those different touch points that we shouldn't expect. You're always going to get those that sign up and then want to book right away, but building into your marketing plan and your marketing strategy. And I should say, I don't even like saying necessarily marketing strategy. It's marketing and sales strategy. They can and should be tied together there. And so how do we build those touch points in where we know we're going to enable that lead to have different touch points with us? And Carrie, so I'll let you speak to kind of some of the different strategies that might make sense to layer on top of each other.
Yeah, just before I jump onto that point, even if you're just focused on webinars, it is really an encouraging sign if the same individual signed up for successive webinars. And in fact, I believe J.L. Smith, Matt, you've mentioned that many people are attending multiple ones. So again, let's not think they attended one webinar, they didn't sign up, that's the end all be all. No, it's very encouraging that they did. And the more you can track, yeah, did they open your emails? Did they download a guide? Did they attend a webinar? Did they attend 2 webinars? Those are the elements that you should, going back to the comment earlier, who should you follow up with first? They raised their hand multiple times. So it's another way to kind of segment out your leads.
Oh no, I was gonna say to address that. You're right. I mean, we frequently see about 3.5 is the amount of webinars that people check out before they're finally booking a call because they want to look at the different thought leadership that we have. So a lot of you on, if you have, even if it's just, they don't all have to be 40 to 60 minutes. Like if you have thought leadership to share on a topic, or you want to download the ones we have from C2P Central and record those, that's the big benefit to having webinars in general. You have your presentation recorded, put those on your website. People can go find those anytime and consume those. And so that enables them to go check out multiple ones and then decide they want to take that call. So I just wanted to address that stat for you.
Yeah, as we wind down, I guess I want to leave you touching on Matt's last question in terms of just kind of what a system look like. I mentioned this earlier. Not only what Matt was saying in terms of touch points of email and phone and text, and don't discount social media. Get people to follow your social media, but you really need to make sure you have clearly assigned tasks. Who follows up? Who's doing the research? Who's following up first? Who's making multiple calls? Who's scheduling? Who's calling to confirm? And all of these should be, frankly, an accountability chart. So we have process charts that I've shared with many of the agency clients in terms of each step when you're running whether it's a guide or an event, and each box should be assigned to somebody. Now, I understand that there's, in some cases, there's only 3 or 4 individuals at a particular firm. So people have multiple, responsibilities. That's okay. But a proactive follow-up system has dates and has assigned who's doing what and has a report that's reviewed, frankly, every week. Because if you don't review the data, don't put the data in and don't expect the data to be accurate. So you've got to, if this is serious and you want to grow your firm from your leads, you must have a meeting with your staff and say, what did we accomplish last week? And the answer of, well, I didn't have time to call, means you're not quite ready to start gathering leads, because you're really doing more damage than, the expression, only get, one chance to make a first impression. Someone attends a webinar, someone downloads, and they never hear from you. And they think, well, 6 months later, you're going to call them. Again, that's not a great first impression. So accountability is critical.
No, thank you, Kerry. Yeah, the more proactive planning and accountability that you do, the more it's going to pay dividends for all of you and your team, obviously, when you got leads coming in and all the way through your pipeline. So that's going to do it. That flew by again. Kerry, thank you very much for sharing all this. And obviously, a lot of this might spur more thoughts and questions from all of you. Please, if you want to circle back with us, you can reach out via Mentor Connect or reach out to myself or Kerry to talk to either one of us or our teams on the marketing side to help you with your pipeline. Look forward to seeing everyone back here next Thursday. Till then, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.